Have you ever felt dismissed, overlooked, or walked over in the workplace? In this episode of the Divorced Christian Women podcast, I'm joined by Grace, Diana, Stacey, and Marie, all divorced Christian women, and we're going to tackle how to set boundaries, speak up, and rebuild confidence in professional spaces. From handling difficult bosses to saying no without apologizing, this conversation is going to give you the courage to take your rightful place at the table. Joining me today are Grace, Diana, Stacey, and Marie. They are all divorced Christian women, and we're going to be talking about professional relationships after divorce. So things like boundaries and respect in the workplace. All right. Welcome, all of you. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Hello. Glad to be here.
Okay. So why don't we just dive in? The first question is this: what is a situation at work? And actually, I'm wondering too, if maybe each of you should just tell like what your experience is in the workplace. Do you work in corporate? Do you work like what are you doing currently? Or maybe what is your past experience? And then why don't you say who you are as well before you say what kind of work that you're, just so that people kind of have an idea of the different kinds of situations that they can relate to.
Hi, I'm Diana Swillinger. I have work history in owning my own business. I was a carpet cleaning business and I worked for nonprofits, and I had a corporate boss and position as well. Currently, I am an independent life coach with a life coach certification school, but I do contract work. So I do have some bosses out there where I'm contracted to be a business and a speaking coach. And so I've definitely had to navigate some of these things still.
Okay. Thank you. Stacey, what about you?
So I'm Stacey Wynn, and I have a long corporate background. So I was an operations leader for over 23 years and then transitioned at the time of my divorce. I transitioned out of that role into a consulting and coaching role. So now my corporate role is consulting and coaching. And then I have a private coaching practice that focuses on women who are going through transition. So that's a little bit about my background.
And transitioning career, like you do career coaching too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she does a lot of different kinds of coaching. Okay, Marie.
Yes, I'm Marie Griffith. I am an accounting professional, and I've spent 25 years in the corporate world in various industry lines doing accounting work. I have been in management. Currently, I work on different projects for companies that need extra accounting support. So I love the corporate world, and this is going to be a great episode talking about how we navigate the workplace.
Awesome. Thanks, Marie. And then Grace.
Hi, yes, I'm Grace, and like Marie, I'm actually a certified public accountant. I was in public accounting for many years, which is like external auditing. And then I did spend some time staying home as a full-time mom. I even homeschooled my children. And then as they got older, I went back to the working world, and I do work for a large bank. So I am in the compliance world.
Okay. Thank you, Grace. Okay, so thank you for introducing yourselves. Why don't we talk about this? What is a situation at work, or do you have a situation at work where you actually surprised yourself by speaking up more boldly than you may have in the past? And also, I'm kind of curious to know if your whole experience with divorce changed any of that energy inside of you, like the ability to be more brave, or the ability to see I can do harder things now. I have gotten through some really tough things, and I actually deserve a voice at the table.
Yeah, I definitely had an experience with that. And I do believe that going through separation, divorce, all of the wrestling that we have to do is part of that, what our values are, where we're in alignment, really what we want to push forward and how we want to push forward in life. And that did translate into a very difficult part of my career in financial services. And I was a site leader, and we were I was charged with closing our department over the course of 2 years. And, in many ways that was very stressful and hard, but it was also a great way to wrap up that part of my career. I have to say, for the people that I led, it was really important that we ended in a strong way. But what happened is we had to do year-end evaluations, as you do out in the world, in the workplace, and we were asked to. I was asked to change the ratings for some of my employees just to meet that corporate bell curve. And I, in that moment, decided to stand up to my boss. And it was really tricky. I mean, this was a really tricky moment, but I felt very protective over my staff, and I felt very protective over our process and just the trust that had been cultivated over 20 years. So I told her no. And she said, well, if you don't change your employees' ratings, then I might have to change yours. And I said, okay, well, do what you feel you need to.
Wow.
She was stressed. I was stressed. She hung up the phone. I sat there. I just remember looking down at my hands. My hands were shaking. I was just so wound up. But I mean, I in that moment, I could not do anything other than that. And I don't know where that strength came from, other than I just put one foot in front of the next and did it. And 5 minutes later, she called me, and I picked up the phone, and she said, I just want you to know I really respect the heck out of you. Although she didn't say heck. So, I think that it is important to know what we believe and what we value, and to stand up in those moments when it's important to us. And so I strongly encourage women I coach to, first, you have to know your values, you have to know what's important, and you have to try hard things, even if you have no experience doing that before. You give it a try. Would I do it the same way again next time? Sure. I think in that respect, I would. But many times we try new things that are hard in the workplace, and it allows us to reflect and shift and make changes over time. But getting our voice out there and standing up for what we believe and building our leadership reputation, it's crucial. And it happens in small ways and in large ways during our career.
Yeah, that's a beautiful story. I mean, it might not have turned out that way. I'm glad that it did for you, but you were prepared. Well, I don't think you thought that it was going to turn out that way.
To be honest, I was surprised it didn't turn out that way. But I mean, I just think that it was a highly stressful moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Marie.
Yeah. Looking back, realized I was freer to be myself without the stress of my marriage. I was able to think more clearly. And 5 months after my divorce was final, I left my accounting manager job that I'd been with this company for 8 years. It was a great company to work for, but there was just something in me that I knew I just couldn't be there anymore. And so I had the courage, it's almost like I had the courage to make that bold step in my marriage, that gave me the courage to then make other changes. It's almost like I was letting go of things that were no longer part of the life that I was crafting for myself.
Yeah.
And so I just, I walked away from that secure job, not knowing I didn't have anything else lined up. I just knew I was going to start taking steps to go back to school. And that's what I did. And so I can only explain that by my ability to think more clearly, and the building on the courage that I had used to get out of a marriage then gave me the courage to step away from that job.
Wow, that's awesome. So how have any of you had experiences where you've had to manage a boss or or even a coworker who's always talking over you and dismissing your ideas, minimizing your contribution?
Yeah, this happens so often, especially to women. And you hear the term mansplaining for a reason because it really does happen. There's a culture out there in many companies and many places. I think it's important in the moment. We have things that are going through our heads. We're feeling frustrated. We want to be heard. We know that someone's restating our idea from 15 minutes ago. So in those moments, we're thinking all of these things. And I believe it's really helpful to start to get those out. And I call it wrapping words around things. We have to wrap words around that moment. I appreciate you bringing up that comment I made 15 minutes ago. Let's expand on that a little bit now that we're on a roll.
Yeah. I love that.
Like that. And for many women in the workplace who are surrounded by people who, whether they're male or female, but they're very extroverted, so they have no trouble jumping into conversation. And for those who are more introverted, we have to manage that as well and say, you've mentioned so many great things today. I need some time to think about that. But by today at 5 p.m., you'll get an email from me and I'll give you my thoughts. So we just putting words out there and just showing that we do have some skin in the game and it's important to be heard. Let's not move on. I have a thought I'd like to share. Those kinds of things. They're small, but they're very important.
Yeah. Gosh, I love that last idea. That is brilliant for people who don't necessarily like to speak up in the group. Mm-hmm. That's great. Diana?
Yeah, I'm actually an introvert who's extroverted in work situations. So I'm one of those people who doesn't have trouble speaking up. So if you're one of those, what we get to do is practice being quiet. So if we're the one on that side, but I've been on both sides. I was in a work situation where I had a coworker came to me a year later after I was let go by this person, and I was looking at bad boss syndrome and all these things online, and this person came to me a year later and said that this boss was a narcissist. And this was before I knew this stuff. This was part of me unpacking it and learning what was happening in my marriage, was having a boss who was manipulative. But she would take things that were my ideas, and then in a meeting, she'd say, because then I was working on it with a coworker, then she would assign my idea to that coworker as if it was her idea and I was helping her. And a lot of times I just let her. So I guess what I'm going to offer is there is a balance. And this will I think this, Natalie, kind of segues into the next thing we're going to explore. But sometimes we want to speak up and sometimes we want to let things go. So we can decide there's some moments we want to assert ourselves more and some that we can let pass. And how do we determine that? We just got to ask ourselves a lot of questions. Or you can get advice from someone else, or you talk to a coach, you talk to somebody who is outside of your situation and get their input too. But you ask yourself, do I need to say something now in this situation? Or like what Stacey was saying is, we can come back to it. Even if you don't say we'll come back to it, if something happens, you get talked over, you can pull back and be like, okay, I don't need to address it now, but I want to come back to it. I want to put my thoughts together and reapproach this with that person or with a different team member or with my boss. Who is the right person to talk through this with? So it's okay, unless something's really urgent, take a step back and figure it out. And I would just offer this, I'll probably say this later in this podcast too, the phrase, I have choices. So even in our work settings too, when things come up and they're uncomfortable, if you can notice I have choices, now you can say, what are my choices? Which one is best for now? And how do I want to move forward?
Yeah. Okay. So that is a good segue. How do we know when it's time to push back at work and when it's wiser to let something go? And I was just thinking as you guys were talking, I thought, I'll speak up. I'm happy to speak up if I feel like it's a safe situation. But if I don't feel safe or if I feel like I'm going to get shut down, then I won't say anything. So how do you know when it's time to push back? I'd be like, never. But I want to hear from you guys. Marie.
Yeah. Well, I'll push back when others are being negatively impacted by stress or overwork, by they're doing too much. And of course, as an accountant, when the organization is at risk for noncompliance, Grace will understand this, we have to speak up. That's our job, to make sure that we're in compliance with that. But when it comes to difficult coworkers or superiors, like what Stacey and Diana were talking about, um, I can typically tell when someone is going to ruin themselves, and y'all know what I mean by that. When they're just you let them go, and eventually everybody's going to know what their deal is. So typically, I'll let that go. There's no need for me to do anything really. One of my superpowers, I think, which came from living in a chaotic childhood home and then my hard marriage, was that I can remain very calm in very tough situations, especially at work. And everybody else can be, frantic, angry, lashing out. But I have this ability to just really stay calm. And so that's really helped me in the workplace because others will see that as me being able to be objective and not, be one way or the other. And so, anyway, that's one way that I do it.
Yeah, that's a strategy.
Yeah,
Grace.
hi, Natalie. Yeah, so for me, it's kind of like similar to a lot of you guys. Being assertive is a fairly new thing, right? And I think it's um, just so learning when it is good or not to push back is gonna be you're gonna have to do a trial and error sometimes. So what I'm learning is just being more strategic about it and picking your battles. So being strategic with when you do it and who you do it to. So I think earlier in like if for me right now I'm in a fairly new job because I just started there in January. So it's gonna take time for me to build their trust that I know what I'm doing and that I'm a hard worker. And so if I push back on another task, it's not necessarily that because I'm lazy. So it does take time. So in the beginning, we'll have to, maybe take on more than maybe what we even want. But eventually, then you need to take those steps. Like for me, it's just taking baby steps, testing the corporate environment, even, what's
Yeah.
acceptable and what's not, the personality of, people around you. And also for me, it's also being strategic, like thinking about it not just from my perspective, but from whoever I'm pushing back on's perspective, right? Whether it's your superior or your coworker. So you think, what are they trying to accomplish? What can they control, right? So if I think that this is not something they can control, then that's not the battle I'm picking. But if it's
Yeah.
something that, let's say it's your boss and you're pushing back on a task, you're like, okay, well, this one is in her control, so maybe I could push back on it. So also thinking about what are their goals? What's their performance metric, right? So if it's going to hurt their performance metrics, a little bit harder to push back on. So, or maybe you could phrase it in a way to go, hey, you could still met your metric even if I push back on this. So kind of like stepping back from it and seeing it from their perspective as you push back. And also for me is, like I say, take baby steps. If you're new at this, maybe even just a big first step is pausing. Like, don't say yes right away. I'll just say, hey, can I get back to you on this? And then you can practice what you're going to say
Yeah,
and then come
that's so
back and say
smart.
it.
Yeah. It's
This is
almost
Diana. I'll give one more compass to deciding if you want to speak up. Might be a better word than push back too. If you don't like the words we're using, just change your own word. Do I want to assert myself? Do I want to speak up? Do I want to say what's on my mind? Do I want to give my input? You use whatever language works for you so it can feel less scary. But thinking back to what Stacey said in her very first example with changing the employee scores, is she was basing her decision to push back on her values. So I would say if you're deciding when it's time to speak up and when not, sometimes your values are your compass because your values are important to you. Do you want to compromise your values at work? If you're willing to compromise them at work in order to placate a boss or keep the peace or even keep your job, how does that resonate with you in the rest of your life? Do you want to be the kind of person who compromises their values when things are very difficult or they could get precarious? Or do you want to hold to your values? And what does that look like? That doesn't mean we have to be the value police and keep everyone to adhere to our values, but when it's specifically involving what we're doing. Again, Stacey's example was great. She was challenged to actually fudge scores. and that she could not do and stay aligned with her values. Now, if her boss said, oh, I'm going to fudge them myself, well, that's a totally different situation. Stacey's still holding to her values, but now what does she want to do? But when you're the one whose values are being challenged directly, that could be the compass you need. I just don't do things that are dishonest. I just don't do things that are disrespectful. I just don't do things that are against the law. That's me. Can't do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Okay. So what boundaries have you learned to set around your time and your availability at work?
I have learned more and more over the years to really use my calendar as an asset. And by that, I mean, it's, well, in many different ways. So as a people leader, I would set time up on my calendar to walk around. So I'd set up time to make sure I was touching base with team members and having conversations with them. But now, if I get a project or a client presentation, then not only does that go on my calendar, but then I back up and give myself planning time and research time and whatever it is that I need to put out there, so that when the day comes and I have prep time on my calendar, I keep it. I don't push it. Like, things need to be on the calendar so that I'm prepared. So I really use that kind of as a big tool for me. But we have to build that in, just because we need to, need to be careful about our work hours. We live a life, and work is a part of that life. So as we think about our lives in general, I think it's important to make sure we have downtime. And, for each one of us, how we do that is going to look a little bit different. And Grace, to your point, when you start a new job, sometimes you have to be a little bit flexible while you're finding your way, knowing ultimately where you want to end up and working your way there. But that's a little bit about, I'll just give a plug for scheduling on the calendar.
Yeah, it's more of then you can make an objective decision about whether or not you have time to do something instead of an emotional decision about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
Marie?
Yeah, I'm a professional in the business world. It's Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 typically. And I adhere to those guidelines mostly. I do not have and never will have, and am actually shocked when a lot of people do have their work email on their phone. I have never done that, never been tempted to do that, never been asked to do that. And so I just don't. And so that's just one way that I protect my time and separate my work from other parts of my life. And I work remote a lot, and I'm very good about stopping my work after I've given my required hours, and I don't work weekends. Now I know that's not some cases people have to work weekends, different types of work, but that's just mine. So I think it's one of those where you're saying be flexible. I was in a new job last year, and the CFO would call me after hours, but he eventually realized, oh, Marie is not. I'm on my way to a meetup group or something, and I'm not at my computer. Well, finally he was like, oh, Marie's not. She's not going to be working at 6:30. So he eventually just stopped calling, at that time, because he could tell I was adhering to these certain guidelines, and so then he didn't make those calls to me at those times anymore. So
Yeah, that's a great example. We're going to shift a little bit and talk about triggers in the workplace, because this is the Christian divorced woman's podcast. And so people listening are probably divorced women who have gone through a lot of stuff, not just a divorce. There's a whole story behind a divorce. There's a whole, sometimes, childhood behind a divorce, right? And so because of that, there's probably a lot of emotional triggers that we all carry with us. And those come with us when we go to work as well. So why don't I open it up and have you share a story, if you have one, about a workplace interaction that did trigger an old wound of yours. And maybe, you've all done a lot of personal growth work. How have you handled things like that differently than you maybe would have, several years ago?
Well, I have one. One of my superiors was constantly firing, small criticisms at me and my team, and he would do that during the team's meetings. And he really seemed to almost enjoy each meeting. It was almost like he was targeting one of us, and it started to be this kind of environment where we're all like just wondering which one was it going to be, and we could usually tell at the beginning. And so it's almost like we got into this mindset of, I mean, you dread the meetings, because you could never tell. So one time, he was doing that, and I was the target. And um, I just remember at one point I had to stand up for myself and remain true to the kind of person I want to be. Diana was talking about who is the kind of person I want to be. And so I was assertive, very kind, but assertive, as I told him that I'd never missed a deadline. So I was reminding him in the past, I've never missed a deadline. And if he has any helpful feedback, please let me know. But otherwise, let me finish this project. I will finish the project on time. And I can say that after that, I was not the target of his criticisms anymore. And, it's almost like that whole idea of you stand up to a bully and then they stop bullying you,
Yeah.
kind of thing. That's what it was like, so I just needed to find that voice and be assertive, um, and still realize I can be kind and assertive. I
Yeah.
think Grace alluded to that. That's what we're learning. Assertiveness does not mean we're not kind. So finding our way in that was one of the very first times that I had done that. And I felt really good about the way that I handled it. Yeah.
I'm glad that he backed down. Did anyone else talk to you about that afterwards, or?
Oh, yeah. It became one of those things where we did talk about it a lot. And a lot of us would start defending the other ones.
Okay.
Once one of us got the courage to do it, then we all were like, no, it's like this. She did this. He did that. Don't you remember? He told you that the other day, things like that. We just had to get used to like doing it,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Grace?
Yeah, so I have experienced also a very stressful situation um, that I can't go into details publicly, but I would say it would put me in a very precarious situation career-wise, and being in a single income household, like all of you can relate. The fear of losing your job is real. But so for me though, all the learning I'm learning from flying free and flying higher and some other things is that how it helped me is that I recognized what was happening. So basically, I recognized that there was love bombing of a person and then a devaluing of me. And it was just, unfortunately, both of them had powers to let me go. And so it was kind of like a weird situation, but at least I saw it. Not that I was perfect. My heart was racing. I was very stressed. But I think the first step is not believing what they say about you. Kind of like Marie was saying, hey, I've met all the deadlines. I don't, what you're saying is not necessarily true of me. That's just your opinion, really. So not going there, not devaluing myself. Also, another way, I didn't engage directly. I just took a deep breath, but I did not apologize and I did not fawn like I may have done in the
Mm.
past. I just stuck to my values as well. I wanted to keep things accurate and I'm just not going to compromise on that. But I stayed very professional and logical, gave my reasoning. Can't really argue with facts, actually. So, I would have to say that I'm not perfect. I It still took me several weeks to recover from that incident, but um, as we keep doing it, it becomes easier.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like a muscle that you have to grow, right? So this next this is a combination of questions that are all kind of related. You can just grab onto whatever resonates with you. But how do you respond when colleagues expect you to take on extra tasks just because you are a dependable worker? And how do you balance being collaborative with protecting your own time and energy? And what does self-respect look like in everyday workplace interactions? You guys have already given some examples of this, but if you want to just expand on this a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, all of this is every one of the others have talked about this, but as we learn better boundaries in our personal lives, that's going to bleed into our work lives as well. And all of them have given beautiful examples of that. But saying no to work may be more difficult, like Grace was saying, because we're vulnerable, especially as single income households. But we build that muscle, just like Grace keeps saying. We practice this. We test it. Like, can I do this? Okay, yeah. And then we just we like weightlifting. We build that muscle and we just keep practicing it and not giving up.
Yeah. And Stacey checks her calendar and says, "Oh, nope, I'm busy. I don't have any time." Or
right.
I can get you on the calendar, it looks like in 5 weeks. So, what practical steps have helped you to maintain professionalism when dealing with a difficult boss?
Yeah. So this can be really tricky depending on the size of your team, the size of your company. In larger companies with human resources, there is a time and a place when it's right to escalate in that way. And that is if you do not have the capability to build a bridge or have a conversation with your boss, or you have a toxic boss, that does happen. Most often, though, it is a matter of communication and being able to find some common ground. Usually we have different personalities than our managers, and we do things differently, have different levels of experience and tenure and different ideas. So the more we can communicate and find that common ground, explain why we want to do what we do, just talk in general. As a corporate coach, I coach leaders all the time about how to have conversations, just human conversations. And that equates to one-on-ones. Most often you go into a one-on-one meeting and it's like an action plan. What do you have on your plate? Where are we on this project? How are we doing on this one? And that is not a one-on-one. A one-on-one is where you go into the room and the employee drives the agenda and we talk about what's important to us outside of the workplace, career path, things that matter to us. And that really helps to build relationships. But for me, getting to know your boss also starts in your interview, or when you're onboarding, or when you have a transitioning leader coming in, or you're transitioning to a new team. You have to spend the time there to get to know one another. So communication, again, wrapping words around things and spending lots of time talking and finding ways to compromise and collaborate.
Good.
Yeah, this is Diana. I want to jump on what Stacey said with knowing your boss. Is that I think sometimes we feel like if we act one way with our sister, and then we act another way with our neighbor, and then we act another way with our boss, that maybe we're incongruent or something's not right with us. But in this vein of getting to know your boss, we do show up differently with different people. I mean, I talk to the store clerk differently than I talk to my best friend. Of course I am. The relationship's going to be different. And so the more we get to know our boss, it's okay to adjust the way we communicate to what works best for that person. And since they're the one in authority, maybe we're the one who's adjusting a little bit more, but that's okay because workplace has an authority structure that we're working within. I would go back to always, again, I'm going to say it again, check in with your values. Do you value integrity? Do you value honesty? Do you value open communication? We can lead from the bottom up a little bit. We want to do it, test the waters, be cautious. But if we bring respect to the relationship, often it can come back to us. If we bring open communication, it might also come back. You might lead from under and help grow that relationship. I like getting help from outside the bottle. As some of us coaches have talked about it, when we're trying to fix our own life, we're inside the bottle, we're swimming in what's in the bottle, Coke, I don't know. But there's a label on the outside and you can't read it because it's all backwards to you. Well, if you get help from somebody outside of the situation, they're outside the bottle, they can get a different read. And so get help from someone outside if you're struggling to communicate with your boss and some things you've tried haven't worked, and see what insight you can get. There's so many other coaching things. We don't have time to get into the details of them, but strategies I give people is to differentiate yourself. That is a separate person with a separate brain, separate ideas. They communicate their way. You're a separate person. They're bringing their own story and narrative to the situation, even as a boss, and you're bringing your own story and narrative. It's not going to match. They're not thinking the same way as you. You're not thinking the same way as them. Sometimes it might align great. Other times we just got to recognize we're different and give space for that. Let them be them and you get to be them. Another coaching technique is giving yourself space to process your own emotions. If it's making you feel flustered, go take 5 minutes and process the feeling of being flustered. Breathe, go do something grounding. Come back, as a more grounded person after you process your emotions. Manage the story in your own head is another technique that coaches will tell you to do. Like, what story do you want to bring? Do you want to bring a story that makes it all more stressful, or do you want to bring a story that's you're growing and learning? You can tell the story going on in your head. And as you're learning your boss's style and finding your way in it, you can use a strategy of making decisions ahead of time. When I'm going to go into that meeting with my boss, here's what I'm deciding I'm bringing. Here's how I'm deciding I'm going to show up. Here's the attitude I'm going to bring if it starts to feel a little tense. And be prepared in your own mind and emotions by making decisions ahead of time on how you want to show up.
Yeah, that's beautiful. What Diana just did there is she just dropped a whole bunch of amazing coaching tools. And that's really, I mean, it's a good example of the value of having a coach in your life for a lot of different reasons. This is not just about the workplace. This is about your personal sense of who you are, and your own growth. Which brings me to the next question. How do you with a coach, you can do this, but also how do you rebuild your sense of authority and leadership in your own life if it's been undermined in the past? Not just in your own life, but even you bringing that aura to the table in the workplace. And also, we could maybe talk a little bit, if you want to, about body language. What role does body language play in commanding respect in professional settings? We could get into gender stuff too here, but I'll let you guys decide what you want to talk about here.
Oh, well, there's so much I could say here, but I do want to say about the coaching real quick before I go into some very practical things. But I have, because of the coaching that I've received here in this program from all of you, I hear it in my head. So all of those tools, Diana, that you were talking about, I have used those tools because now, because of the coaching that I've received in this and all the things that I'm learning here, I have that. I have those tools in, or it's almost like I have an internal coach now. Thank you all. Um, I have a Natalie, a Stacey, and a Diana, and even a Grace in my head telling me, so that's the value of our community here. And I'm so thankful. Practically about building our sense of authority and leadership, and even taking that into our body language, I think of the concept that Amy Cuddy thought about or writes about, talks about. It's called power posing. I think we've talked about that here, where, even just to change your body and expand it and make yourself feel more comfortable, does wonders for our internal feeling about ourselves, even in that moment. And then I also think of Susan Cain, who wrote the book Quiet. She was a prominent introvert who actually learned to become a powerful speaker while she was preparing to publish the book. And she did that by Toastmasters. I don't know if any of y'all have heard that. It's a nonprofit organization that is dedicated to helping people learn communication and leadership skills. I was actually involved in Toastmasters for 13 years. And I can tell you, it helped me immensely in my career, not even just in my career, but in ministry work as well. So those are just two very practical things that you can do. Toastmasters clubs are everywhere. And, they even do those virtually now. So that's just a way that you could learn speaking and leadership skills. They even have a project in one of their, because it's educational pathways, is they lead you through different projects. And one of them is about your body language and how you hold your body when you're speaking. And it's just a wonderful organization. So those are some practical things.
Thank you.
Well, thanks, Marie. Yeah, I would say the main thing about rebuilding your confidence is just learn, learn, learn. Just be thirsty, be curious. And I'm taking a note of all the resources that Marie mentioned, and as well as what Diana and Stacey and Natalie mentions, and I'm gonna check them out later. Um, because the most important thing is learning, and kind of like I was saying earlier with the triggering event, the most important thing is recognizing what is happening. And honestly, before the last few years where I've been learning a lot, I would not have recognized what was happening. As far as body language, I would just give some pointers that I'm learning, because in this day and age, we are in remote environments a lot. Most of my meetings are on Zoom. So whether you're on Zoom or Teams, I'm just learning that, sit straight up, which, I still have to remind myself because I habitually slouch. Sit towards the front of your seat and try to place your video screen underneath the camera on your computer. Sometimes I forget, like I have multiple screens at work and I'll have the Zoom video on a side camera. So then I realized later, oh, people looking at me sideways because I'm looking at my screen, but it's not where the camera is. So just placing it where underneath the camera. Like today, am on a laptop, so my screen is right underneath the camera. So, and also another thing I've learned is, because as one thing also when you're just learning to be assertive is, well, at least for me, is that I worry about losing it emotionally or sounding too aggressive. But you do want to be firm, but still have the right tone. So for me, I'm learning turn your mic up so that you can actually speak softer, but still be heard, and resist the temptation of getting physically louder. Um, because it's not necessary. The mic is picking you up, and it's easier than having the mic down than speaking louder, because then that kind of adds a harsher tone to it. So that's just something I'm learning.
Well, and we can hear that actually. You're actually like demonstrating that for us. I love that because you do come across as very calm. It's very soothing. It's very emotionally regulating, your voices, because you're talking quiet. Yeah. And yet we can hear you plain as day. Yeah, I love that. What a great tip. I love that. Okay, so we've all been through divorce. We've got a lot of personal, like stuff we don't necessarily want other people to know. Maybe other stuff we do want them to know. Maybe some of the people listening, some of the women listening, they might be dating again. They might be still in circles where that's not even allowed. If, like there are some Christian circles that think once you're divorced, you're still like married before God. So if you're dating, you're committing adultery or whatever. And also that's your personal life. And yet, how do you navigate or decide what personal information that you're going to share when you're at work with your coworkers, with the people you're working with? And also, how do you deal with maybe gossip that's going on? If you don't say anything, sometimes that feels like, well, if I don't say something, then they're going to draw their own conclusions about things. And there might be stories that circulate about me that aren't even true. So should I say something? Have you guys worked through that?
Yeah, I'm glad you said when gossip is happening, because it does happen in the workplace. And we can minimize its impact, though, when we decide not to participate in it. It's that whole thing of let them and then let me walk away. without bringing attention to myself or spreading it. And when I say bringing attention to myself, we don't have to be the gossip police, meaning, oh, y'all shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Easiest way to impact somebody is just walk away from it.
Yeah.
My experiences that has been when others realize that I don't do it, that they usually will not do it around me. They realize, oh, okay, she's not gonna do that, or she doesn't appreciate it, or so they just do it in other places. So whether I'm the subject of the gossip or not, it really doesn't matter. I choose to remain in my core values and treat others the way that I want to be treated. My mom lived this way and because she was a professional. And I really learned from watching her. She focused on her work, she built good relationships, and she just didn't gossip. And so she was never one to come back home from work saying this and she and he did this, I didn't experience that a lot. So I think I learned from that. And then I have this rule about what I share with coworkers, and I live by it. I only share what I'm okay with the whole world knowing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just as simple as that. And my girls, they're in their 20s and they're learning this, and they've experienced oversharing. And hopefully it only takes that one time, right? To overshare. But yeah, that's just my rule.
Yeah.
So
That's good.
I love that rule. If you don't want the whole world to know it, I have to say I have one coworker now, kind of. We do contract work together. We do speaking coaching together. But after about 3 years of us working together, I decided he's earned my trust. And we became friends outside of the coaching work that we do. And so he does get a little more information from me, but not while we're at work. It's a separate friendship outside of work. I don't talk about that stuff if we're at an event together or something like that with him there. It's kind of in a different little bubble. But I would say, in general, we don't need to tell stuff to people unless they've earned our trust. I love asking ourselves questions like, has this person earned my trust? How have they earned my trust? How will I know when they've earned my trust? How will it help me if I share this with him or them? Will it help me? If it's not going to help me, if I can't see that, then I'm just like, then I pause. I don't see why. So with this person I became friends with, we go back and forth and encourage each other, and we share wisdom with each other. And and if anyone's worried about my friendship with him, he is married, but he's gay, so we're good. So,
I love those kind of friends.
Yeah. So we've got good boundaries there, and, we're not interested in each other anyway. So we can talk to each other about just about everything, but boy, did he earn my trust first. And I dipped my toe in the water a lot with him, and I think he did with me. And so now we have a solid friendship. Yeah. Okay. Now I want to give you one thing. If you're bold and people around you are gossiping and you want a strategy, if you want to really let people know where you stand, walking away, they don't always get the message. You just pick up and leave the lunch table, or you walk out of the room. They don't always notice. They might after a while, like, I guess she doesn't do gossip, but you could just say something. And I used to say this around those situations: this doesn't sound like it's my business. And then I'd walk away. That's pretty bold. That's up to you. You got to know how that's going to fly with the people you're around. But if you want to be bold, there you go.
Yeah.
And I love that you brought up, I'm jumping in because you were talking about trust and knowing who you can trust. And on the other side of this, so for those who are developing as leaders and who, have some influence and responsibility, part of that is also learning when to be vulnerable. So I would just give a plug for vulnerability from this Enneagram 8. I know it all too well. So Brene Brown is an excellent resource. She has lots of great YouTubes on vulnerability, and a great book called Dare to Lead. And I would definitely suggest that we watch her too, because I think for us coming out of unhealthy relationships, we have to at least know that we're in a healthy work relationship. And then there is some level of vulnerability that we can choose to have. because trust is built not in big things, but in consistent small ways. And just a little bit of information about, how we're feeling, what we've been through in the right moments really does build trust, and it builds teams, and it builds relationships at work, because we are human beings. We go into an office, but we still have emotions, and it's important for us to share those in the right moments.
Yeah. Okay, we have time for one more question, and this one is for Stacey because she is a career coach. What are some practical ways that we as women can advocate for ourselves in our salary or our promotions or workload negotiations?
Yeah, there's so much great information on negotiations. You can watch YouTube's and watch actual negotiations happening to get a feel for how they flow. And I do talk to people about this all the time, and I have negotiated for my own salary as well. So I think the important thing is to know that salary is always 100% of the time a starting point. Anyone who provides you with the salary knows and expects that you're going to negotiate. And women are terrible at this. Men negotiate about 80 to 90% of the time, and women, it's more like 40 to 60% of the time. So we just leave money on the table right and left. We do this in a way that maintains flexibility. So let's talk about this. How much flexibility do we have here? There's all of these tips and tricks for, how we do this at different points in time. If we're interviewing, if we're negotiating an offer, if we're negotiating a raise, I think the most important advice that I have is to do it, and to find tools to help you do it, to script it out, to practice it, and to know that it's completely 100% expected. I think that helps us to know that it's okay. But that's a great, the label you talked about, Diana, the label on the outside of the bottle. The first time you do this, it feels so uncomfortable. It gets easier over time, but it's always helpful to have someone to bounce these things off of.
Yeah. I'm going to do a plug for a resource that I recently read. It's a new book by the host of the Money with Katie show. Her name is Katie Gaddy Tassin. I think I said that right. It's a book called Rich Girl Nation. And in that book, she has a whole section on negotiating. It's really a book for women. And her podcast is for women too, although men will enjoy it as well. She's hilarious. And she's also smart as a whip. It's one of my favorite podcasts. So I recommend that podcast, but also I recommend that book, Rich Girl Nation. It's just basically how to manage your money as a woman. And of course, part of that is our ability to make money, and how do we increase that ability. So I'll recommend that. All right. So before we close, why don't I so for those of you who are coaches, we know now that some of you are coaching, you work with women, some of you work in the workplace, but you also have these responsibilities and these communities outside of the workplace where you are helping women achieve their goals and do their personal growth work. So why don't you share what you offer? You just go around. We can start with Stacey. Since we're on you right now, the spotlight's on you. Why don't you start?
Sure. I know in the show notes, we'll probably have links.
Yes.
So you can link to the work that I do in my private practice. I do a lot of things within ministry world. So a lot of the coaching I do has to do with the impact of life's transitions on our faith. And that is something that I care deeply about and love to pour into others who are going through and navigating kind of those wilderness moments in life. I am passionate about the Enneagram. I've been using it now for several years and use a tool that I love called the IEQ9 in corporate world and in my private practice as a way for women. We're talking about jobs. So as we get back into the workforce and are thinking about what we want to do and who we are, even as we enter into that season, that's a great tool that I love to use. So just connect with me on the link, and happy to help.
All right. Diana?
Yeah, again, Diana Swillinger, and I'm going to spell that because I'm going to offer you all to email me today. So if you want to email me, my email is diana@dianaswillinger.com. It's spelled Swillinger. The reason I'm giving you my email is because today's podcast is a lot about career stuff. And so I just want to give an offer out there to any of you who are entrepreneurs or business owners. I do a lot. I've coached thousands of entrepreneurs on their businesses and how to speak from the stage in order to grow their business. So if you're in a career space where that's something that you're looking for and you want to advance your business or career in that way, then send me an email. Otherwise, you can, if you want to know about my life coaching, I've said that in a lot of episodes before. Just go to rympodcast.com and learn more there.
Yeah, she's the host of the Renew Your Mind podcast. And Stacey, you have a podcast too.
I do. Marsha Ramirez and I host the Fresh Start podcast.
Okay. So, and we'll put links, maybe not to every single little thing, but like Stacey has one link and it will take you to all of her other links. But when it comes to podcasts, all you have to do is just go to your favorite podcast app and put the name of the podcast in it. And there it is. It's easy to find podcasts. Okay. So Marie.
Yes, I'm Marie Griffith. Like I said earlier, I've been in the corporate world as an accounting professional for 25 years, but I'm also an ordained chaplain and a trained spiritual director. So I'm actually on a journey of trying to combine those things and, offering people a unique experience of receiving holistic care focused on supporting their inner life as a leader. I pitched this one time to a local business leader. He seems very interested. I'm kind of doing that as a pilot program right now because saying spiritual direction in the corporate world, they're like, what are you talking about? They don't even realize the value that it could bring because it is not coaching, it's not therapy, it's a personalized approach to spiritual and emotional well-being, which will help them lead with clarity, resilience, and alignment. And so that's the kind of work I'm wanting to do. But I love to help women navigate, you know, after their divorce or in the middle of wherever they are in their faith journey. Providing that kind of soul care is just one of my favorite things in the world to do. So I have a website called Spiritual Direction with Marie. You can find all the information there and reach out to me, and I'd be glad to meet with you.
Awesome. And then Grace, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. I hope you don't mind, but all of the women that are here today, they're all part of my program, which is called Flying. Well, I have two programs, Flying Free, which is for Christian women who are in emotionally and spiritually abusive relationships, but Flying Higher is for divorced Christian women who are maybe healing from that kind of stuff and want to go further in their self-development work. And it's a very affordable program. It's $59 a month or $590 for a whole year. And it is full of all kinds of opportunities that you can learn and grow. We have courses and we have get-togethers. And so Grace, why don't you tell, you've been part of our program for several years, as have the others. What do you want to share maybe a little bit of your experience with Flying Higher? Why would anyone be interested in joining? How would it benefit their lives? I'm sorry
Sure.
if I put you on the spot.
Oh no, I don't mind at all. So anytime. Yeah, I think, um, first of all, I say yes, tap into Stacey, Diana, and Marie. Any kind of coaching, any kind of help would be so helpful to you. Flying Free and Flying Higher to me brings another level of value because in addition to, like when you go to a therapy session or when you go to a coaching session, you hear something at that time, right? But with me, what's most beneficial about the Flying Free and Flying Higher program is that it helps me become a better coach to myself. And you are your own best coach because you are with yourself most of the time, 24/7. How you speak to yourself while you're getting ready in the morning, while you're doing stuff during the day, that is influenced by what you're learning in Flying Free and Flying Higher. And the benefits are just exponential.
Yeah, I love that. This is so good. I've never thought of that before, but you're right. Having a personal coach is so important for, especially for targeted areas of your life that you feel stuck in and you need some help. And yet, knowing how to coach yourself in general with just everyday stuff in your life is also life changing. And I think the way you describe that is beautiful. I'm going to use that. I'm going to use that when I talk about it now from moving forward. I think that really does encapsulate what my dream is for equipping women inside of Flying Higher. So thank you. I just want to thank all of you so much for taking the time out to have this conversation. And I look forward to talking with you again in 2 weeks. We're going to be talking about church relationships. And so that's it for the rest of you. Thanks for listening. And until next time, fly higher.